one of the mantras that I always had was, if you wake up 30 days in a row and you hate your job and it sucks to go to work, then find something else to do. Life's too short. Mm-hmm. And I realized I should take my own advice on that.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
Today, we have Dan Griffith on with us, and we're certainly pleased to have you here, Dan. Bill, take it away.
Yeah, appreciate you being on, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your former career and then how long you were in that initial path?
Yeah, so I would say I may even have had 2 or 3 formal careers. As I look back, some people tell me I should write a book. So I don't know, maybe that's in the planning. But my undergrad degree was in accounting. I graduated with a 4.0 in accounting, and of course was pretty heavily recruited. What was then the Big 8, which is now I think the Big 4. And decided that was not really the route that I wanted to go, and ended up going to law school. Was fortunate to serve as the Deputy Secretary of State in South Carolina for a period of time. Learned that governmental work is not the thing that I wanted to do with my life. And there are great people that do that, but for me was not the thing. So worked with some very large companies, primarily in sales and marketing type roles. I was very interested in small companies and working with them, and so did the same thing as I'll call it a full-time employee for a period of time, and and then one day decided, you know what, I want to have my own business, so I did that.
So what path? What is that new business? What path are you on now?
So I'm working doing coaching for I call it mature startups. So companies that have been around for a while, but that have hit a growth plateau. Mm-hmm. And with kind of my unique background of accounting and law and sales and marketing management and even execution, I've kind of bring a unique package to them to help them grow. And then, interesting enough, has launched a new venture even since we've met called GrowDGtal, which is a marketing agency, but it's focused specifically on generating leads.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah.
Very nice. You know, it's funny. I haven't thought about this in years, but you actually just brought it back to me in terms of sort of that government work. I was very fortunate coming out of high school to go into what was called the Federal Junior Fellowship Program. There happened to be a government. It was a Navy base right nearby, and it was weird because that was the center of Pennsylvania. But anyway, that was the Naval Ships Parts Control Center that made way back when the Russians, leaked out their top 10 hit list. It was on the list because they had literally aircraft carrier parts stored there, that kind of thing. So they're like, okay, let's take out the supply chain. So anyway, the program was designed for me to work every summer after college, a year of college, and get promoted every year from a GS2, 3, 4, 5. And then if I wanted it, I could go into what was called, and I'm sure it's still around, a 579 program, which was kind of like, you work as a year as a GS5, then you get promoted to a GS7, then again to a 9 after a couple of years. And again, like you said, some great people do that. It just wasn't for me. So I found another way myself to find something else to do. So yeah. So Dan, just as you think about your past, what you did in the past, maybe it was your accounting, your government, something like that. Is there a humorous story that you can share along the way that kind of made you scratch your head and say, oh boy, why am I doing this?
Well, so I had the great fortune of working with and managing people over time, and being able to mentor with them and work with them. And one of the mantras that I always had was, if you wake up 30 days in a row and you hate your job and it sucks to go to work, then find something else to do. Life's too short. Mm-hmm. And I realized I should take my own advice on that, because I found myself at that point at several places in my career. So I think, and it's great advice for anybody, right? We're very fortunate to live where we live and to have the background that we have and the choices. Mm-hmm. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world, and not everybody has those choices. But for us, where we live, we do have those choices. And so, it's not good for your health. It's not good for your relationships. But yeah, I realized, it was more of a physician heal thyself type moment. But it was certainly something where I said, man, and I've had it a couple of times in my career where I've looked at that and gone, yeah, this really does suck. Maybe I need to find something else to do.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah. Well, I guess along those lines, then, Dan, what was like a deciding factor that made you say, okay, this is enough? Was it just a buildup over time, or was there one like inflection point that you go, okay, I've got to change things here?
Yeah. So I always wanted to own my own business, but I also tell people that I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today if I hadn't had that kind of that history. Right. I mean, I've got for a long time, I realized I was telling people, hey, seriously, don't do that. And now, I'm building some content and things around that. But the flexion point was, I realized I was very passionate about helping people, and I was very passionate about seeing those results and being able to point to those results. And working with just one company wasn't the best thing for me, because I didn't feel like I could expand my reach enough. And I also realized, for those of your listeners that are kind of been in the startup world or been around the startup world, it's easy really to burn out, because you can go to one company, and I did it several times in my career where I just was all in. We were going to go public, and we were all going to make be billionaires. And I realized that that's first of all, got up 30 days thinking this sucks, but also realized that, boy, I think I could have greater impact in working with more people. And just recently started doing some work not only with, I'll call them companies, but also the people that fund them. So private equity, not so much VC, but even some family offices. So
okay.
Hopefully I answered your question. I might have wandered around a little bit.
No, it's a good insight into what you're thinking at the time. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, Dan. So as you were really moving in the direction to go down the path of, owning your own company and, helping startups, et cetera, grow their businesses, et cetera, were there some obstacles you encountered along the way?
Yes. The first was kind of how to make the break, right? Because if you've, I would imagine a lot of your listeners, I would imagine, Bill, even you and Richard, you get used to making a level of income, you get used to having kind of the benefits that come with that, the stability that's there. And, I'd say starting a business is like jumping in a cold pool on a hot day. It's going to be good, but man, that first 5 seconds when you get in, I'm like, oh, and you kind of are averse to that. And I think so being concerned about, okay, how am I going to replace my income? How am I going to do healthcare benefits? What structure am I going to have? Even though I've got a degree in accounting, I haven't actively practiced that except for doing my taxes, or I hadn't, except for doing my taxes for a long time. So there was a lot of things that were quite frankly scary, right? When you start to think about that. And I had a good mentor that told me, you just need to jump into this thing. You're equipped. You're smart enough to do this. You know what you're doing. Just jump in. And I think the first 6 months for me were tough because, there's always a question, are you really going to make it? Are you going to, because I didn't have any investors. I started, I bootstrapped on my own. So I didn't have that added pressure, but still you're wondering, man, am I going to have to go back and take another job? Am I going to, is this going to fail? We're not going to get this off. And then also kind of finding my niche and who I'm targeting. Because I like to say I kissed a lot of frogs until I found a couple of princes, because I didn't, I wasn't quite sure what my target market was. I kind of knew, but looking back, that was one thing where I was like, man, I should have been a little more deliberate because I wasted a lot of time early on. But those were just a couple of things that for me were kind of scary in getting the rocket off the launch pad. But it also gave me a unique perspective because now I'm dealing with folks that are going through the same thing, right? They've invested all their money into this. This is their baby. It's their venture. So I think it gave me a good appreciation just emotionally where people come from when they're trying to get a startup off the ground.
That makes sense. I mean, once you're psychologically, all in and everything, it's a different thing than just kind of doing it as a side hobby. And right, you're relying.
Well, and this gets used way overused, but burning the boats, gives you a level of focus that you don't obtain otherwise. And I did that. I mean, it's not that I burned bridges, but I really didn't have an alternative. I was like, I got to make this work. So, that kind of separates all of the things that aren't important and really helps you focus in.
Right. Absolutely. Well, what was, as you did that transition and went through the obstacles, what was your first victory you can think starting your entrepreneurial side?
Well, my first, I was very fortunate to have my first victory even before I kind of formally started. I was, interestingly enough, at a conference and had talked with somebody that was doing some work for a startup that I was working for. And we just got to talking about sales, at dinner one night. And I was starting to think about this. And then we were getting ready to head on a plane back home. We were out on the West Coast. And I said, well, are you headed to Atlanta? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, well, do you live in Atlanta? No, I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I was like, dude, I live in Greenville, South Carolina. So I was able to take a cross-country flight and another flight home with somebody that ended up being my first client, which was, and I didn't know, neither one of us knew what we were doing. I think when we started this, but it was good to have somebody that had a long-term view. And very successful. He's still my client, and he's we've been able to make a lot of money for his company and grow his company. So, but it was nice to have. I'll call it a partial win, and then not too long after that, I got a big contract for him, which was about 2 or 3 months in. Now, not everybody has that much success right away. Of course, in sales too, you got to wait. Make sure the client pays, right? So that took some time, but yeah, it was a nice win to get, and then it really gave me a good jumping off point to talk with other customers.
Like you're gaining some momentum as you're building that out. That's great.
Yeah, back in my consulting days early on, we used to joke that you don't know, as a consultant, you don't know where you're going until you've been there for 2 weeks. And then somebody's like, no, you don't know where you're going until the client pays the first bill. So.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Because we've all been there and done that. And, I had a couple of those false starts at the beginning too, where it was just, I realized that I had given the advice to salespeople a long time. Hey, lose early. And I really had to apply that in my business because just sometimes personalities don't fit, or you have somebody that they think they want help, but in reality they don't. So you have to just figure out how that works. But it was, I feel like learning the lesson to constantly iterate and change was super valuable for me, as being willing to pivot quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense, Dan. So in your direction now where you're coaching, et cetera, is there a humorous story that you can share along the way, something you've encountered?
Well, yeah. So humor, I think, is part of my daily work. And I get to work with a lot of different people from a lot of different cultural backgrounds and different perspectives on the world. So I think, one of the things that I've learned is to be self-aware, or more self-aware than I was. And of course, the last year has helped us to be more self-aware because we're all on video or not, in front of people. So, and I think with that, I've had to learn to be more, I'll call it flexible or I don't know, tolerant probably isn't the right word, but I have 4 kids. I have lots of pets. There are people in and out of my house all the time, even during the pandemic, because I've got teenage boys and I coach. So I the one of the things I've learned just specifically in the last year is, we're recording. So I've got, my podcast that we had talked about. And I mean, just inevitably, when I went to record the podcast, the dog would start barking. People would go walking around upstairs. And of course, you've got sensitive mics and things like that. Or, everybody has the Zoom stories where, people walk in there. And so I think for me is just learning to be more flexible with all of the things that come in life, because I wasn't before. And, it's just the humor of everyday life. I mean, on my recording my first, podcast episode, and we have the mic set up, and we've got, the videographer there, and he's got 2 cameras, and we've got lights, and my dog comes barreling in the room, knocks everything over, literally hops up in my lap in the chair, and then just sits there. Now, my dog is not a small dog. She's about 65 pounds.
Yeah.
So there's not much room for her and me in the chair, but it ended up being a good thing, right? Because that was that we'll use that as promotional, right? Hey, even the dog likes the podcast, but yeah, it's I think I've learned, to be really flexible, and I travel a lot, so there's all kinds of humor in travel for those of you, or even those of your listeners that have done that. Just the places that you go, people that you see. You guys might find this interesting. This past Tuesday, I was traveling out of Greenville, South Carolina, and got on a plane, doing what you do. And you get on a plane, I was doing some work, and I went to get up, and I realized this guy in front of me is asleep, and he's gonna miss. So I kind of bump him to get up, and gets up, and he's a huge dude. I mean, he's tall. He's got his hoodie on, his mask. So we're walking off the plane, and I look over at him again. I'm going, gosh, this guy looks really familiar. And then he looked at me, and I looked again, and it was Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback from Clemson. That was, I guess he was just traveling with his wife. But it's funny how you see people and you interact with people. And of course, I got a selfie with him. I had to do that because I've got some kids that are Clemson fans. But yeah, so I mean, it's as you can tell, I'm loving what I'm doing, and humor is certainly a big part of that.
Yeah, awesome. So I had a similar dog story. I was on. I don't think we were recording this show, but I was on a Zoom session, and a friend of ours came over and with her dog, and her dog loves me, and of course, I'm awesome. So this was a 90-pound dog that came bursting through the door, and I happened to be sitting on a couch doing this Zoom session. And next thing you know, there's like this dog in my face, and licking me to death. And from an outside point of view, it almost looked like I was getting mauled. But,
they were like, "This is live on Zoom. Some dude's getting killed by his dog."
Call the police! Oh my gosh, where's he broadcasting from?
We also have cats, and had gotten a new cat, and I was on a Zoom call, and I was in our living room on a couch because I got thrown out of my office because I had a son that came home from school and needed a place to do his Zoom calls. And everybody in the call's laughing. And I'm going, why in the world are I mean, because I'm kind of like becoming a little self-conscious. What? And I realized that this cat was walking behind me on the back of the sofa and just kind of turn around and look in, and then they'd walk. So that was pretty funny. And I think somebody sent me a recording of that session. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, the biggest thing for me is to remember to wear the pants, and unfortunately that's usually not a problem for me. But anyway, so
yeah, you definitely are a little more conscientious about what you wear too, because
right,
you can't wear your So I'm a Boston fan, and I've got people that are in New York, so I can't wear my Red Sox T-shirt, when I'm on the Zoom call with them.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's awesome.
Well, Dan, where are you now in your journey? You started the accounting degree and then got into law, then the coaching, and your podcast. Can you talk a little bit more about your podcast and where you are in your coaching platform?
Yeah. So with my podcast, this was really over about 30 years of saying the same thing. Oh, seriously, don't do that. Really, don't. That's a bad idea. or myself doing things and going, wow, that was just really stupid. And as I started, I had jotted things down over time, and one of the somebody said, hey, you ought to write a book. And I've got a mentor out on the West Coast. I said, man, I'm not a great writer. I don't like to sit down and write. He said, well, just start recording stuff. And that's kind of where the idea of the podcast came from, because I'm thinking, man, okay, if I'm going to record this, then maybe it would be helpful to people. So we have what we call DDTs, the don't do that. For those of you that followed wrestling when you were in younger years, you remember what the DDT was. But it's so we call it a don't do that. In each episode, we spend some time on something that either I've done or somebody else has done, and said, hey, don't do that. My whole purpose in that was really just give back to the community. If it helped grow my business, it's great, but it was to give back. So with the coaching business and Grow with Dan business, we continue to add clients. I'm probably doing more. I did a lot of embedded work initially. As a CSO, I'm still doing some of that, but doing more advisory type work and coaching work, either on the PE or the actual company side. And then I just found a need. You guys are on LinkedIn just like me. And I kept seeing all these groups that were talking about, we'll do your marketing, or we'll do your lead generation, or we'll do these things. And I look at their experience, and they were like, 2 years in enterprise sales. I'm going, wow, you don't even know where the bathrooms are yet when you've got, and I've got a lot of experience here, with the bald head. I like to say it. I did this since I had a long flowing locks of hair, which was, my wife reminds me, 35 years ago. But I saw a real need for marketing focused on lead generation and accelerating sales. So that's why we founded what we call GrowDGtal. And it's again, my intention there is to help people and help them grow, and not, see them paying 15, 20, 25,000 to agencies and just not getting much for it. Because I'd seen that happen across my clients. And especially as a new business, name idea is great, but man, you need some leads and some sales and some money in your pocket. And I think that's really where, I would call it my superpower, is both in my coaching business and on the marketing side.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's great.
So Dan, what's the future look like for you? Where's the road take you from here?
So I think we've got one more kind of idea that we're developing around. Actually, two more ideas specifically focused on startups that aren't mature, that don't have the money to spend. Quite honestly, on somebody like me, or even on the marketing side, but they're just trying to get off the ground and just like get off that launch pad. So I've got some online training I'm working on, using some of the methodology that I've used over the past 25 to 30 years. We're hoping to launch that early fall. We will start recording season 2 of the podcast, because I recorded all of season 1, so all 22 episodes before I launched it, because I was like, I don't want to have to be trying to fit this in every week. I know myself, but let's get them done. So we'll run through November, and then we'll launch season 2 in January. And then the final thing that we're looking at is something called the startup store. And this one is just, you guys are probably the first time I've talked to really anybody outside of people who work with me in my business about it. But what I found is a lot of times startups need a lot of different things. They need legal help. They need accounting. They need to know about tools. There's all kinds of tools out there that can make your life easier. And I'm thinking, man, if I could bring them all to one place and, just have some links and, write some articles there, or have people write articles about, how to be more effective, how to find funding. I think it would be super helpful. So we're looking at that. I've got kind of the critical mass on it, but we need to develop that a little bit more as well. And then, we'll see where those go. I'm not going to do this forever, but I also don't see myself as retiring. So, I think, as with most businesses, if somebody came along and offered me a lot of money, then, we might consider selling and founding something else. But I would definitely feel like I'm kind of the serial entrepreneur type, so would probably find something else to do pretty quick.
Right. Well, what's something, Dan, you've, as you're growing the business, like you said, and scaling and developing these different ideas, what is something you've implemented that's helped you grow your business? Is there a business tool or some pattern you've worked on? Or?
Yeah. I think the one thing that's been most helpful for me is building networks. And when I say networks, primarily social media networks, and even more specifically on LinkedIn, and really leveraging the power of LinkedIn. There's a lot of people that do that badly. We all get spam every day, from people. But, quite honestly, how I connected with you all was through LinkedIn, and just being very specific in who I was looking for, and, having a conversation. But I used some tools around that. I use Sales Navigator to help me kind of parse my market. And then I use Calendly. So we're giving you a free advertisement, Calendly. You're welcome. To help schedule meetings. And then I've used a variety of tools for, I'll call, like auto prospecting and auto visiting profiles. I don't have any that I really would strongly recommend there. We're still kind of trying to settle on something, but that was transformational for me, because it started getting me having conversations with the people that I needed to have conversations with.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think that's critical too. We spend a fair amount of time on LinkedIn and Sales Navigator. And again, I whatever you're looking for, there's probably somebody in your network either can help you, or somebody that can, help you along your way, and vice versa, where we want to be a resource for people that we can offer value to as well.
Right. And that's probably the best. My dad was a pretty successful banker, but the one thing he kind of drilled into my head was, you build your network of people and you'll never be hungry. And that's really paid off. I mean, and especially with as many changes as I've made with my career over time, you always got somebody that you can talk to, or somebody that you can network with.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely.
So Dan, what advice would you give somebody who's looking to make a career path change?
So I think maybe three things would be, I would say is important. Number one is, while you're in your current position, talk with people that are in that area. I mean, again, going back to networking, which we just talked about, there's a lot of people out there that are willing to be mentors, or can share with you kind of what it's really like. And as part of that, talking to other people, talk to your significant other, the folks that, that depend on you, either emotionally or financially, and just make sure that you're communicating clearly with them, what you're thinking, what you're planning. I think the second thing is just get started, start somewhere, even if it's why you have your current thing. Just start small, bring on a client for a number of hours, and you get to see what it's like. But get started, because a lot of people spend a lot of time planning, and then they get to the point where they can't. I mean, I use the example of travel. People say, "Oh, I'm going to travel the world when I retire." Well, some people retire and it's too late, right? Their health is gone or whatever. So I'm just saying, hey, get started. And then the third one is, don't be afraid to fail. I mean, you are gonna stub your toe and trip and fall a lot, and that's okay, because by those failures you come to success, and that's just not a cheesy slogan. It's you learn and you iterate and you get those lumps and bruises, but you really learn from them. And I think learning, to me in my career, learning how not to do it was a whole lot more valuable than learning how to.
Yeah, fail fast forward.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's the premise of your podcast, right?
Right.
Same mistakes if you can learn from somebody else's mistakes.
Right.
Sure. Absolutely.
Great. Well, Dan, what's the best way for listeners to be able to reach you and learn more about what you offer and what you do?
Yeah. So we've got a website. First of all, on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is Dan Griffith SR. So that's an easy way to get a hold of me. Certainly message me there. We also have a website. It's www.growwithdan.com. On there, we have links to the podcast as well. And certainly our podcast, Seriously Don't Do That, is on all of the major podcast platforms. I've got a great team that helps me do that because I could not do that on my own, but they're constantly updating that. But those are the best ways to. Then my email is just dan@growwithdan.com.
Okay, very good. We'll make sure we put those in the show notes below. And Dan, we want to thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show, and enjoyed the conversation and wish you continued success.
Thank you, Bill. And I enjoyed being with you all.
Yeah, Dan, thanks very much for being on. We'd also like to thank our audience. We really appreciate you listening in and tuning in, whatever your platform is. Please give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate that. We want to keep the show growing and bringing more guests on, and we appreciate your patronage. We'd also like to thank Park Capital Partners for sponsoring this entire endeavor. Certainly, we appreciate you having you on, Dan. And remember, folks out there, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.